Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're kicking off our subscriber game tournament season 2. And for group 1, we have our first match here between the Alaskan Assassin versus the Crossbowmen. And before we jump into the battle itself, we're going to take a look at their drafts, starting with the Alaskan Assassin in the green. He brought 3 generals in Wenchou, Lü Bu, and Guojia, which is the classic combination of champion, vanguard, and strategist, which works really well in campaign, and also works decently well in multiplayer as well, as the unit choices are rather balanced. We have 2 units of the Ye Vanguard Spearmen, which counters cavalry on Wenchou, 3 units of Camp Crushers, which counter infantry on Lü Bu, 3 units of Xiliang Cav for mobility, for assistance in fighting generals, for crushing backlines, as cavalry is probably the strongest unit in the game for Total War 3 Kingdoms. And finally, in an interesting choice here, we have 2 units of the Onyx Dragons, which are expensive archers with the advantage of having fire arrows, high base damage, and of course, having 250 range. So fire arrows are quite useful as it applies a massive debuff in terms of morale. I think it's 4 points for the fire and also 4 points for the arrow, as in you're under fire. And both of that combined is a great way to reduce the enemy infantry morale if they are standard units. And for certain units like the Pearl Dragons on the other side with very low armor, the Onyx Dragons are going to shred them, which is going to be interesting here as he's running into quite a favorable composition. Since these drafts are done blind, I think it's rather unfortunate that the more Crossbowman side, we have Yan Baihu, which already made a mistake in that he is placed first as he is leading the army, as when you're loading into game, you can't see the details of the unit on the bottom as we can on the screen here, but you can see the info on the top. So you can see Yan Baihu leading 1,000 plus men, and that basically tells your opponent that you brought Yan Baihu who has stock, and that ruins your stock advantage, and that is definitely a mistake there. There's also no units on Yan Baihu, which is a strange choice, as if you're assuming you will go into the match with stock, then having units that also get stock seems to be a huge advantage. Instead, he opted to put 4 Pearl Dragons on Taishi Ci. So the focus here looks like a lot of Hail of Arrow and Poison Volley type ability on both generals. It's quite powerful, but it does lack sustained killing power on units and also general killing power, since his 3rd general is Yuan Shao, who most likely will not participate in the melee combat portion as he needs to stay out of melee to give off his distant courage buff to nearby units, making them essentially unbreakable, which is quite valuable and useful. But looking at the units, it's very one-sided. We have 6 units of Ye Vanguard Spearmen, also very expensive unit, costs 1,000 as I mentioned. Pretty much these 10 unit here cost more than, I think, 10k, which is 2/3 of the entire fund limit, and the rest spent on generals. So that's an interesting distribution because you end up with an all infantry comp, no cavalry to assist the general, who already lacks killing power, unless you plan to hit really precise hail of arrows on the enemy general. It's going to be really hard to kill the enemy general since you only have 2 fighting generals and one of them you're probably trying to sneak around. So 2 of your generals are not going to participate in a lot of the fights. That leave Taishi Ci behind to do most of the fighting himself against the enemy. And he's probably also looking to skirt combat to launch some good hail of arrows on the enemy. So essentially you end up with 3 generals who can't fight or would prefer not to fight, while the enemy will most likely try to target you to prevent you from getting off those hail of arrow attacks. And without any cavalry to peel for them, if they misplay and advance too far, they could get caught off guard by the enemy cavalry and get stuck in combat, and that might be a terrible situation. Now you could argue that the entire comp is centered around anti-cav, as you have the crossbowmen or the crossbow option from the Ye Vanguard Spearmen, which is a great counter cavalry unit, and the Pearl Dragons will do well in sustained combat against cavalry. But there is no incentive for the enemy to charge at your infantry formation, and if they keep a certain distance from your generals or simply outshoot you in this case, as the crossbow on the Ye Vanguard Spearman only has 160 range, it could get pretty ugly. But of course, this is all theorizing how it plays out. Things could be very different once we go into match with the micro. And speaking of that, let's hop into game. So, as we jump into game here, we can see the starting deployment from the bird's eye view. It's pretty standard. I think both have taken a decent defensive position on top of a hill here, actually. This is a slope. And then this is a pretty forward guerrilla deployment, but not forward enough to, challenge the backside. Mainly because I think they're trying to stay close to their cavalry, which is a good idea. The three generals are together. It's interesting that Yanbai who has guerrilla deployment, but didn't try to sneak ahead in this case, because there's no intel on the more crossbowmen side that Guojia's on the other team, because Guojia was in the third slot. So they can only know the first general, which is Ventrol here, and he didn't try to aggressively deploy, which is good, because if he did, he would got caught off guard right away when Guojia shows up and sees him in the beginning. So he's together with Taishitsu, and the intention's pretty clear. They want to get up there and use their abilities to damage the troops. And I just think, they're going to get into trouble just because there's no cavalry. These hidden calves might surprise them. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe he gives up the attack because you see Guojia, you're not going to sneak by. But let's assume Guojia's not here. This deployment has one big issue, just like putting Yanbai Hu first in your composition. You're already telling them you have Yanbai Hu. You put him, who's supposed to be invisible, next to your other visible poison volley character, and it basically forces the enemy to come to this area. And you can't get a sneak attack off if you're right next to the guy who is visible. What's the point of bringing an invisible character at that point? But of course, this is not going to impact this match because Guojia is here. Let's see how it actually plays out. We're going to stay in bird's eye view for a little bit until we see the movements. The generals are charging in, because if you look at these three generals here, you know for a fact you can beat these two, especially with them so far behind and everyone's so immobile that they're not going to be able to help them, and they're still charging up. That is almost suicidal here. Is he trying to get off with like a really good hail of arrow here? No, he's running back now. He should try, bumped into a tree. He should try to spray Lu Bu with a hail of arrow and try to kill him. It's all base damage from the hail of arrow attack, so it's not going to do too much to an 80% armor character. They're slower than Lu Bu, they can't get out of this. So he bumped them. Oh, poison volley though. That doesn't do much damage at all. Lu Bu is poison, but against single entity, the poison damage is only 90. It's per entity damage. So if you hit the entire retinue, every single entity loses 90 health in the duration. If you hit Lu Bu just loses 90 health. So it doesn't do anything. And he also got disrupted. Guojia showed up, and with his Stifling Deluge, he couldn't do anything. He's trying to time attack. Too late. The dismount is pretty aggressive. He was hoping to just kill them, right here, but wisely they just ran away, which is what you should do against dismounting enemy generals. Oh, here comes, oh my god, his own formation is delaying his units. But you lack mobility. If they don't want to fight you, you can't really force this fight. The only effective range of these two characters now is the range of the crossbow, because that stops the cavalry from coming close to you. And the cavalry, this is sort of the range. It's 150 for Distant Courage, it's 160 for them. So it's probably a little bit farther here. If you fight within their protection, then yes, the enemy cavalry can't really hunt down your generals. But if you, want to go after their units, probably not going to happen. Now, of course, both sides can be in a staring contest for a while. But I think, ooh, cow traps. I think they should just move up. They have better quality infantry here. These are glorified spear guards. If you look at their actual damage stats and defensive stats, it's not very high. Pro Dragons, biggest issue. A whopping 70% evasion, looks so beautiful. 7% armor. It's so low. I don't think you get value from these units. We'll see though. I mean, running into Onyx Dragons probably very unfortunate because look at how unbalanced the damage is. 83 base damage, 3 armor piercing. This is because he has Fire Arrow on, which has very, very low armor piercing. But if he swapped it, probably slightly better balance. But in this case, he can get away with that because you have no armor. And he can outshoot this formation, so he just got to come down here and just start shooting at you, making you very uncomfortable. And once the infantry starts swarming, they can't do enough damage fast enough to stop the charge. And if they do collide, I think the melee over here will win out. And plus the generals. Rage of Liu Bu can kill these guys really quickly. We have a roar that's probably not so useful because Yuan Shao is still here for Distant Courage, which is very powerful. And this formation is too tight, by the way. Like, this line and this line can't shoot because they're too close to each other. You can leave gaps. Enemy cavalry can't squeeze into the gaps. Enemy generals can, certainly, but why don't you just spread these out a little bit more and then put Yuan Shao in one of the squares, which protects him from having the general squeeze in, rather than tightening up all 6 and then reducing your crossbow capabilities by quite a bit. Because any of this overlap, they just can't shoot. They're obstructed with the view. Like this and this, you're wasting a lot of damage potential. We're going to fast forward a little bit because it seems like more cross... Oh, he's actually making a move. A very, very long distance. I mean, the poison volley is going to get value here because he poisons quite a few units. The hail of arrows will waste. That's his only ability that can kill generals, and he's not using it to kill generals. Like, how is this army comp ever going to kill Liu Bu if he doesn't hit him in the face with a hail of arrow? People can probably bait out a couple ammo here. They don't have too many. 14, 13-ish. It's also very tricky to turn off Firing Will for these units because you cannot swap Firing Will when you're in formation. Now see, that looks like more than 160, but that's because of the elevation. Lose formation. It doesn't help. Not even, maybe against Hail of Arrows, but not against Poison Volley. Against Poison Volley, you just have to like stagger your troops so they're not in a straight line like this. Because right now this is like a perfect opportunity for Yamahu to just spray across these 5 and let the poison take down. It's about 20 units actually each time. Just getting touched by that poison. I think 17's like if you took no damage but just got poisoned. Alright, you can see the charge. It's very predictable. He's probably not even going to come close. And he's not going to look for the best shot, but whatever shot he can get. Once again, this is a waste of hail of arrows. Like, how many are you going to kill here? You killed 8. The poison kills 20. Yeah. What happens after you use the 4 uses? Who's going to kill Liu Bu? They can't fire because he's not on the apex of the hill. You can see this? They can't see the cavalry. If he spread out his unit and placed some here, place some here, place some here, it would have had much bigger range of protecting the units. Alright, they're just going for the charge, which is probably the smart decision. And I don't know how they can peel away. Sure, he can give a little speed up. Okay, so he's not microing super well, Alaskan Assassin. He's just going after 1. He could probably go after both. He has more than enough units and, you know, generals to go after both. But at this point, Taishus is not getting away. How do you get away from this? You can't. No one's going to be able to help you. You have a very static formation that's really slow, and Yuan Shao can't do anything except for, you know, boost their morale at this point. And you're getting outshot by the Onyx Dragons. Okay, so Yan Bai who got away. I guess he's dead. Taishus is just gone. So 1 cavalry chase him, and you can just ignore him because he's not going to bounce back if he's constantly under attack by a unit. So at this point, you can just save your force, leave 1 cavalry with him, and then all the generals can go focus on Yan Baihu because Yan Baihu is going to try to do some poison volley. Oh, he's scared of the Pearl Dragons? I don't know about that. I mean, high ground advantage, slightly factored in. I think the Camp Crushers will do okay against them. Splash damage too. Oh, that's bad microing though. He's just selecting all of them to charge into one target. You want to evenly space out. And also lose formation at this point, probably meaningless. Yanbai getting his final shot off. I think he did 3 already, so this is probably his last one. He's going to get some value here if he can hit this right now. Only 2 units. Maybe come over here to the side, or come over here to the side. Yeah, the downhill situation, not great. But here comes the cavalry. Everyone's still kind of in loose formation, which is not really useful in combat, but I think he's going to be okay, because the generals are alive, and I don't see anything on this side that can kill these guys now. He's out of poison volley, by the way, so he's really not a threat. No offensive abilities whatsoever now. Yuan Shao is coming to join the fight? Yeah, I thought so. That's not a good idea. Okay, so Pro Dragon's getting some value. Crush those 2 Camp Crushers. Granted, they were in loose formation, and oh, now they're just going to get murdered, right? We're going to have a couple of slam abilities right here. And there goes, you know, a huge chunk of your super expensive infantry that has no defensive stats. And the cavalry is going to charge, which erases your evasion during the duration of the charge, which means you're just fighting a unit that has 7% armor. So cavalry actually kills Pro Dragons if it's not a frontal charge. Yeah, they're getting crushed here. And the generals can't do anything. You end up with passive generals. If Taishitsu hit some of the hail of arrows on the generals, then that would be a different story. Okay, so now we're in a melee mode. All 3 generals are still mounted. The Onyx Dragon's getting free firing time because you have no mobility. You cannot flank these guys. So massive value from Onyx Dragons here. And you can see not everyone's firing. The overlap's killing it. The cavalry's suiciding. That's probably not the plan. Alright, let these infantries get in here, especially this last Camp Crusher. I think they can tear this up, especially if you stay in close formations. Against Camp Crushers, maybe you want to be in loose, just so the splash damage doesn't kill you fast. Alright, they're hunting down the last general. They probably don't need to. He doesn't have any more abilities. Just kill Yuan Shao here. Li Bu's smashing away. Okay, we got the Unbreakable active, the melee evasion boost. That will help. Well, I can probably cancel that. Yep. Wisdom River just cancels the bonus you just gave them. They're still unbreakable. But you can see these units are not fighting. Why are they still in this formation? There's no cavalry that they're defending. Time to break the formation and join the fight. And Yuan Shao is getting killed by 3 generals right now. So as he's in melee, these units can rout once that Unbreakable expires. So we can start seeing wavering units now. He's on and off, but he's getting killed. Guojia got dismounted, it seems. And Baihu's pretty helpless. He can just use his swords. And we have dismounted Li Bu, dismounted Ventral, killing him really fast. Yep. There he goes. Now it's just slow grind to army loss. And Baihu getting targeted next. He's going to kite away, which is fine, but not going to change the outcome of this fight, as Li Bu is going to murder the rest of these vanguards. Those Onyx Dragons. I mean, defensively speaking, if you look at the stats, pretty much what you paid for the Onyx, the Pearl Dragons. The Dragon units, these two have very similar defensive stats. The last unit here. Negatives 100 now. But it's gone. A little roar to push them away. Army loss kicks in for Yan Baihu. And that should do it. That's the match, I believe, once he fully routes off. What else is on? Oh, nothing else is on. Let's take a look at the post-match damage figures and see how it turned out. Right. So I think a couple things. These units, for some of them, not a lot of value. These two combined took out an injured Camp Crusher. These units got hit by 3 sets of Yanbaihu poison mollies, although might not be the same units. Each hit is probably worth 20 damage. Most of the infantry damage, I think, came from Yanbaihu himself with the poison ability. He did well with that. That's very good against enemy infantry. Hail of Arrows is very good against enemy generals, in this lineup especially, because you have no one else that can kill generals. He didn't use them on generals. You can see the difference of the number entity killed from the 3 Hail of Arrows that he used, I believe, maybe 2. But regardless, it's very low because the distance is so far when he had to use it. He couldn't get up close, and that just didn't work out in his favor. Not having any cavalry means you can't actually take out their range. So the range actually has free firing time, and the cavalry can't help you fight the enemy generals and enemy cavalry. So tremendous values from the cavalry units. Once the generals are dead, obviously Lu Bu and Ventral is going to go to town against your regular infantry, and that's really what's going to do you in. And Yuan Shao here is just a useless character. You know, you're keeping him to boost the morale of your infantry so they're unbreakable essentially, but that's only the case if you have the enemy generals killed. I think a good way to think about this is you can think of generals and cavalry units as sort of the Air Force in a modern day sense. And while you have some anti-air units here, they're not good in melee. Any sort of tanks and infantry gets up to them, they're going to lose that battle. You have 3 little airplanes. 2 of them are good bombers, but they need protection. You have no fighter planes to protect them, and the enemy have, fighter planes. They wipe your little planes out, your central command sitting there, not doing anything, and your units get killed after that point as they swarm you with their infantry and just clear you out with the Air Force still assisting. It's a little bit, analogy there to make it a little bit easier to understand. But in essence, a couple key mistake. Yanbaihu being selected first, not trying to sneak with him. Even with Guojia showing, for example, you would play that one out slightly different. Having the Hail of Arrows and not really knowing what to do with it also kind of hurt. Because in that first charge, when they were kind of going in, I thought he was trying to line up a Hail of Arrow on Lu Bu, who is fast and will be, the first one to arrive by himself. If you time a point blank Hail of Arrows, that might change stuff. If you kill the unbreakable one, the killing power on this side is just these 2, right? Guojia can't really fight. And if you kill one of them, then you can start using all 3 to fight. Why boost morale when they're not in combat? He's unbreakable. Even if he just ends up with 5k health after winning the general fight, he can still sit there and make them unbreakable. So I think the mistake is Yuan Shao didn't participate. They didn't participate. They were clumped up too much. And once the melee happened, they still stayed clumped up, which doesn't do you any good. And that pretty much is our match as Alaskan Assassin moves on to round 2. And we'll see him play King of Yen. And we don't have a second match today because the original matchup with King of Yen versus his opponent was canceled. That's the only match that was forfeited in round 1 because his opponent actually had some internet issues that he couldn't really work out, so he had to forfeit the match. And aside from that, we'll be having double-header matches every day, representing each of the groups. And the winners of each match in the same group will face off against each other, with the victory time as the determining factor for the side selection in round 2, which will be a siege battle round with 2 matches. They will have alternating attack and defending sides. And if you are tied after the 2 matches, both of you will move on to round 3. If you win both, you jump directly into the top 8. If you lose both, obviously you're eliminated. And for those who move on to round 3, they'll be playing me in a time trial for a chance at the top 8, essentially, because we come down with 36 players to 18 for round 2. And if we don't do some sort of time trial, having 9 contestants move on to the 3rd round doesn't make a lot of sense. We rather have it down to top 8 quite early. And that's the plan we're hoping to do. And stay tuned for that as we continue here with round 1 tomorrow. Until then, bye.